Good evening and welcome. I'm Mark Larrett, the CEO of UCSF Medical Center, and it's my real pleasure to welcome you here tonight to support the UCSF Brain Tumor Initiative. Now, many of you are here tonight because you or a family member has had an experience with the devastation that's associated with a brain tumor diagnosis, treatment, and course of disease. Many of you knew Gordon Murray, a longtime friend, and you'll hear a little bit more about Gordon tonight. We honor him, and in a way, this event tonight is in his legacy and in his memory. There's so many people to thank for putting this event together tonight, our event committee, the on-air sponsors, the donors, and an anonymous donor that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. I won't reveal the anonymous donor, but I will tell you a little bit more about in just a minute. But there are three people that I really want to acknowledge tonight who have been the event co-chairs, and that's Meredy Green at table 14. Meredy. Kathy Podell at table 12. Kathy. And at table 4, Randy Murray, wife of Gordon. I just want to say a couple words about Randy. Your strength and passion and drive to take this initiative as a positive way to honor Gordon's legacy is really moving to all of us. So thank you, Randy, for your model. I want to mention that anonymous donor. The anonymous donor has underwritten the entire cost of this evening's program, and in addition, will match every dollar raised at this event, including tonight, up to $1 million. So please give generously, and thank you to that anonymous donor. Now, we're truly privileged tonight to welcome this evening's host, acclaimed radio personality, screenwriter, and maybe best known of all as the brother of Randy Murray, the one and only Ira Glass. Ira Glass, his work on NPR's This American Life has helped shape the popular discourse of this country. Thank you, Mr. Glass, for being here tonight. We are deeply appreciative of your generosity in coming here. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about This American Life. Premiered in 1995 and is now heard on more than 500 public radio stations each week by over 1.8 million listeners. It is the single most popular podcast in the country, with 700,000 people downloading it every week. I assume there's some in this room who are in that club. Ira began his radio career in high school by writing jokes and sending them in to Johnny Walker, a fast-talking rock and roll DJ on Baltimore's WCAO. He started working at National Public Radio as a 19-year-old intern, editing the tape stories that others had recorded. He worked on NPR's morning and evening news shows, Morning Edition and All Things Considered. He's been a news writer, editor, producer, and finally went on the air himself as a reporter, initially with somewhat mixed results, as he'll tell you himself. In 1995, he launched This American Life from WBEZ in Chicago, a show with a seemingly simple premise, a weekly theme and stories from various writers on that theme. It's really different than anything else on radio, in that we get to know the characters in the stories so that we feel empathy, amusement, and surprise. Ira is the guy who first introduced us to writers such as David Sedaris, Sarah Vowell, and David Rakoff. He's one of the inventors of what they call on public radio the driveway moment. And I know I've experienced the driveway moment. You're so drawn into the story, when you drive into the driveway, you can't get out of the car because you got to wait for the story to finish. In addition to the radio show, Ira produced a television version of This American Life on Showtime that won 3 Emmys. This American Life has several other film and TV projects in development based on stories that were on the radio show. Sleepwalk with Me, which features Ira in a cameo role as a wedding photographer, in addition to his co-writer and co-producer credits, recently won an audience award at the Sundance Film Festival and is hopefully coming to theaters near us soon. So we want to invite you at the conclusion of the event tonight to join us in the sculpture gallery where Ira will be available to answer questions. And I'm sure many of you have worked up questions over the decades and would like to get them answered. This is your chance tonight. So now, please join me in welcoming America's storyteller, the man that the New York Observer called the Romeo of public radio, the one and only Ira Glass.
So here's why we're here. UCSF raised some money a bunch of years ago and built this building for cancer research of all kinds. And I've been talking to people about this, about what they want to spend the money on. And basically the deal is that it took them a while to get the construction going on that building, and the cost of everything kind of increases with each year. And by the time they were done, they had this 5-story building, and everything was done except for the 4th floor. And they will totally let you visit if you want, and it's completely boring. It's empty, it's drywall, there's concrete floors, there's space that was supposed to be filled with laboratory benches and researchers, there's nothing there. And if you talk to Mitchell Berger, who's the director of the Brain Tumor Research Center and the Neurology Research Centers, not to mention he's the Brain Tumor Surgery Center that he's head of, and he's also the president of the American Association of Neurologic Surgeons. Like after I talked to him, I looked at my career, I was like, oh, you're the king of the brain doctors. That's who you are. If you ask him, he'll tell you that not having that space functioning has put the researchers in a very strange position.
It's the most bizarre thing, I must say, that I've ever seen in my 27 years in academic medicine, is we have the money to hire people. We have people out there who would love to come work with us, but we have no space. It's that simple. In fact, I had a great guy who we lost because he wanted to come desperately. I had no place to put him. I had the money to hire him. I had no place to put him.
The situation now in our labs is that we have almost 2 people for every lab space available.
This is Dr. Russell Pieper, who oversees the brain cancer research at these labs. He's the principal investigator and director of basic science. These people who he has now are crammed in elsewhere around the building.
In essence, we have people sort of, they don't have the space to sit or do their research, more or less. They kind of take turns. They, find some other place to sit when they are not doing an experiment. They share the lab bench with someone else while they're doing the experiment. So we're really, it's a real beehive. It's really overpacked.
Dr. Pieper is actually he's the person who scientists in the lab come to when they have space questions and issues. And typically what happens is somebody comes to him and he or she wants to hire a new person on the project. And then he has to tell them, sorry, there's no space.
So, that happens pretty frequently, actually.
Really? How frequently?
Probably every other week, I would say.
Wow.
Somebody knocks on the door and has pretty much the same story. Here's somebody who wants to work in my lab who will cost me nothing. Somebody else is paying their salary, or they have a grant to do something. They have funding to do this. Can I bring this person in?
He's resourceful, and often he is able to figure out some way to squeeze them in among the other people, or you take this time and this other person will take this time during the day. Though he says about a third of the time he can't do it, and there's nowhere to put them. And the biggest way that this affects scientific progress is that it means that there are all kinds of things that they want to do that they cannot do. Dr. Berger told me that it is like driving with your foot on the brake.
That's the problem, is that we have a whole bunch of new areas we want to get into. The labs we have now and the investigators we have now want to expand, but they can't.
For example, genomics. Genomics means that they're looking at the genes that are responsible for tumor formation, and they're trying to find the drugs that would target these genetic pathways. And this is the radical thing that's happened in cancer research in the last few years, is that since we can look at the genes of things, we can start to do this. And Dr. Berger explained to me that doing it is a massive undertaking. It's very time consuming because basically you have to look at all the genetic mutations in each tumor, like you compare it to an unmutated genome, an uncancerous genome of a person. And then once you find the ones, okay, these are the ones that are the mutations, then you have to look at those genes and the interactions with genes, one after another after another. It's like an act of brute force. You're like crunching the numbers of this thing, and you're looking for pathways that you can target with drugs.
Because there are drugs that exist out there through pharmaceuticals and biotech companies that we can use to target those pathways.
And so are we like at 1/10 the power that you want to be? Like, in other words, is it like you have one researcher on this and you want 10? Like give me a sense of a scale with this.
I think we're kind of sitting back at about 30% of where we should be. So I'd like to ramp it up twofold. Double the laboratories and then build into that from there.
That would mean 4 or 5 new faculty members, each staffing their labs with a half dozen to a dozen postdoc assistants, grad students, et cetera.
So you put that all together, that could be 60 new people.
And does the money exist for the research, but you just don't have a place for it?
Yeah, and that's really kind of the irony, is so the money exists, we have the NIH funding, we do have some private sector funding as well. So we have the capability to do the work, we just don't have the physical plant. Yeah, it's crazy.
They're doing the work, but at a much slower pace than they want to go. I have to say that one of the amazing pleasures of getting ready for this event tonight was getting to talk to the scientists at UCSF, because it is like talking to NASA scientists in the year 1967 as they're plotting their way to the moon. There's so much to do, and they have so many promising leads, and they have the technology and the ability to explore them. What one of the doctors said to me tonight at the reception, he was saying, like, there has never been a moment like this in cancer research. It's just busting open because of all the genetic stuff that they can do now. It's a very exciting time. They say things like,
It's really astonishing to me how much we know more about brain tumors now than we did even 5 years ago.
that's Dr. Pieper. So if you happen to meet with one of the scientists tonight, I mean, they're all around you here tonight, or you get the chance in the future, I really, really encourage you to talk to them about what they're working on, because it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. Dr. Pieper told me about this whole area of research that tries to harness our own immune systems to kill the cancer. And he said, okay, so think about it this way. We have these immune systems. They're supposed to kill, like, disease, anything in foreign, weird stuff in our body, unusual cells. Okay, so here's a question. Why doesn't it kill off the cancer cells in our bodies? Like, right, that's their job, is to kill off stuff that's dangerous to us. Why doesn't it do it? Well, the answer is, for one thing, the cancer cells put on a disguise. To do that, they
Change the proteins they express on their surface, and the immune cells don't recognize them.
In other words, the immune cells see these proteins that are a disguise, that it's a trick. And the immune cells are like a cop walking the beat, and they're like, nope, nothing here, nothing to see, and just completely pass them by. It's very spy versus spy. And how that works, the acts of disguise, is one of the areas of research at UCSF. And then the second thing that cancer cells do, there's a scientist named Andrew Parsa at UCSF who's shown this in his work, is that they create proteins on the surface of their own cells that kill any immune cells in the neighborhood. So immune cells are kind of like scouting around your body, bump up against these cancer cells, and then they never get a chance to kind of relay a message back to base and harness the body against them, because the cancer cells can just kill them off. And Parsa, this guy Andrew Parsa, what he's working on now is a vaccine that will train our immune systems to recognize the cancer cells as the enemy, as something they're supposed to kill, despite the tricks that the cancer cells are trying to pull that they don't get seen, right, that they're trying to deceive. And this vaccine is actually pretty far along. They've gotten to the point where they're doing clinical trials. They have, in very small numbers of patients, very small populations of patients, successfully trained patients' immune systems to attack a glioblastoma tumor and kill cancer cells. Though I should say this is still very early stages of testing, and they haven't done like the big case control trials. Here's Dr. Parsa, who's doing this work.
It really looks very, very provocative. It really looks exciting in terms of increasing the overall survival in our patients. But you just never know until you do a randomized study. But we think we have something.
Now, if you had more space and more manpower, what difference would that make in this kind of research?
We need more space so we can get more people on the field to fight this disease. With that space, all those people we could bring in would really expand the applications of this immunotherapy protocol to other types of brain cancer, other types of patients, pediatric patients, patients who are under the age of 18 with a malignant brain tumor for whom we've exhausted all our options. Having more space would allow us to move that forward.
Has there been a moment in the last few years when you've wanted to hire somebody and expand in some way and you haven't been able to?
Yeah, yesterday.
So I'm here today at this fundraiser because of my brother-in-law, Gordon. And his story was he was having trouble with his left hand. One morning, he couldn't get his contact lenses in, and he thought it was like some repetitive motion, carpal tunnel thing, and he went to the doctor figuring he was going to get a cortisone shot. And the doctor examined him and told him that it's either a stroke or a tumor and sent him to a specialist. They did an MRI. It revealed it was a glioblastoma. Doctor sent him to UCSF. That was a Thursday. The tumor was growing so quickly that he was operated on Sunday. And I saw the care he got. I mean, I didn't know any of this before this experience, but one of the primary determinants of your longevity with a glioblastoma is your surgical result, like how well you do in the surgery. And what counts is not just how much of the tumor they get rid of, but these tumors interact with the functioning of the brain, right? So it's not just taking out the tumor, it's doing it in a way that you minimize interference with motor skills and speech and hearing and vision and all that other stuff. And unfortunately, at other places around the country, because they don't do the sheer volume of these surgeries that they do here at UCSF, patients don't get the benefit of the kind of expertise that Gordon got here. And the surgeons at UCSF who work on brain tumors only work on brain tumors, whereas neurosurgeons elsewhere would do, spines and a variety of things. So we in our family felt very lucky that Gordy was in San Francisco and had access to that. If you're here, I think many of you might be familiar with the overall ethos of the place. From top to bottom, there's this real sense of mission. The best way I can describe it is, I hope this isn't insulting, I mean this in the best way possible. The doctors there are like doctors on TV. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a whole building of Dr. House, but from the early seasons before he went crazy. You know what I mean? Like they're super smart, they're doing everything they can, coming on Sunday, no problem. Think through an entirely way to treat your disease. That's the premise of the whole place. And one of the things that the money that we're raising tonight will do is go for a program that UCSF hopes will create a state-of-the-art program of a kind that doesn't exist anywhere else, that will not, they're dealing with the patients. This would deal with the people who are caring for the brain tumor patients as family members and try to integrate them better into the treatment process. And to explain, I think the easiest way to explain why that's an important thing is to talk about what happened with Gordon. This is I did a little interview with my own sister, which is a really weird thing to do. But I did it. It actually wasn't that weird. And this is her.
The problem with any neurological disease, but particularly brain tumors, brain tumors are just different from other kinds of tumors because in the case of a glioblastoma, they're almost always terminal. And then in addition, the tumor is in the person's brain. So it affects their motor functioning, it affects their personality. I'm obviously not a medical person, but it became very challenging to deal with. And then there's all this medication and treatment on top of that. So, Gordon was on steroids for a while, as many brain tumor patients are. That has its own, set of issues. He was in full-blown mania at one point, which was really challenging.
His second tumor was in his frontal lobe, which affected his judgment and his sense of his self-perception. And like a lot of Gordy's friends are here tonight, a lot of people who knew him, and all of us who knew him and loved him know that even before he had a brain tumor, he had a very forceful personality. One of the things that I really adored about him is that he is a person who is always trying to convince you of something. Am I right? Whether it's you should be doing yoga, you should be investing with DFA. I've been meaning to ask the Congresswoman who's here tonight this. I would bet on the answer. I am confident that since she knew Gordy, even though she sat for years on the House Financial Services Committee, is a national expert on banking and financing issues, I believe that at some point he must have sat her down and tried to convince her, talk to her about her investments. That's my brother-in-law, who I love. And the way this manifests when his brain was enhanced with a tumor and steroids was one of the medical kind of like results of it. One of the things that actually impacted like his outcome was that Gordy would go in to talk to the doctors, and he would not necessarily present to his doctors what was really going on. He would kind of paint his Gordon picture of it, which was not exactly the same thing as the real picture. And like with driving, oh my God. There came a point where we in the family were all very worried whenever Gordy got behind the wheel.
Or said anything, not even like said boo, but just said anything, he would like kind of jump.
Yeah,
Or said anything, not even like said boo, but just said anything, he would like kind of jump. And so I could imagine him driving down El Camino.
When anybody came up on his left side, the quote isn't cueing right. When anybody would come up on Gordon's side from behind him, he would totally startle. He would totally startle, and we were worried.
Or said anything, not even like said boo, but just said anything, he would like kind of jump. And so I could imagine him driving down El Camino and somebody coming up on the left, which was his bad side, and honking the horn, and he could lose control of the car.
And so you wanted him to stop driving, and he didn't want to stop.
He thought he was fine, and it was a challenge.
When Gordon's doctor talked to Gordy about it, Gordon had his forceful personality, and he is the patient, right? And so unless he were declared incompetent, like there's rules about when you can force somebody to stop driving, and he didn't meet those. Like until that point, what he said is what counts.
I think it exemplified for me this issue of my perception of what was going on and Gordon's perception of what was going on were different.
And the doctor's going to need to know that.
The doctor needs to know it.
It happened in all kinds of areas of his care. And Dr. Susan Chang, who's the director of neuro-oncology at UCSF, told me that what happened with Gordon and Randy, perceiving his situation differently, she said this happens all the time with brain tumor patients.
Patients themselves, when they meet with the doctor, they want to sort of put the best on. And that's just a natural, I think, what happens, you know. And you can sort of see in the room that the caregivers are just kind of shaking their heads, or they're like, no, you know. And so, you know, it's kind of like, okay, there's another story here. And, you know, it's very important to hear that story.
But right now, the way that care is organized, right, there's not built in a time for the caregiver to just say, like, here's what I think is going on. And it's not built into the doctor's schedule. As you can imagine, the doctors have to go from patient to patient. There's no formal process to evaluate what the caregiver is saying and whether it should become something to take into account in the treatment. And Dr. Chang says this is especially important because the tumor may work on the patient's ability to communicate or on their memory, so they don't even remember the side effects that they've experienced from one visit to the next.
Patients themselves, when they meet, we have to step back and say, you know, we really need to integrate the caregiver experience with the patient's care to optimize how we take care of our patients.
And so the idea is that Dr. Chang is going to use a portion of the money that we're raising here to hire a few people who will both talk to the caregivers and get their input, and to also help with issues that come up. But for a lot of patients, one of the big things is just like you have a person who you're living with who's dying, and just dealing with the insurance is a huge, huge problem. And UCSF has resources to help you with this, but like there's nobody to interface to make that happen. Dr. Cheng is also going to hire somebody to do a study to determine if this whole approach of dealing with the caregiver actually leads to more effective treatment. Like, is it, let's quantify ways this is actually helping at all. And already they've put into place like this thing, which is one big step. Whenever you go in as a cancer patient for for your next appointment, the first thing they do is they put you in the MRI tube, which takes 45 minutes, and the caregiver is just sitting there. And so now what they're doing is that they're debriefing the caregiver during that time, like right now before this money is happening. And I think at a lot of places, the caregivers would be seen as a kind of time suck for the doctor, like a kind of nuisance with all their questions and their requests and their thoughts, and they would not be seen as a source of potential information and a source of potential better treatment. And it shows a lot about the spirit of what's happening at UCSF, that when they were approached about this idea of like, couldn't something here better? Their response was like, great, let's see if that helps. How do we do that? So that's why I'm here today.